Phil Phails at philosophy. What the heck could it be? Life such a mystery. Phil Phails.
We've talked a little bit about the virtue theory and then consequentialists, which was Aristotle on the virtue theory. And then that's just all the virtues, like create a virtuous person, right? And then consequentialist is like, what is the impact of the action? And we choose the action that has the most positive, or you said the most pleasurable impact.
Right. We have to figure out what we value first, right? Yeah. Classic utilitarianism says pleasure.
Okay.
Right. Again, don't think of it just as physical pleasure, but mental pleasure, happiness, etc., contentment, like all those things.
It's not hedonism.
It is. It's altruistic hedonism. Okay. So it's hedonism that is not about producing the most pleasure in yourself, but for all of us.
Yes.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It's selfless.
Right. And then deontological.
And then the one in the middle that we haven't really discussed a lot is the deontological theory, which is Kant.
Right.
And yeah, it first went into this. I didn't really understand this a lot. He kind of describes Kant trying to do for moral philosophy what Newton did for physics.
Exactly.
Two things fill the mind with ever new and increasing admiration and awe. The more often and steadily we reflect upon them, the starry heavens above me and the moral law within me. Mm-hmm. And I mean, how do you do that for philosophy? How do you specify the laws of matter and motion within philosophy?
Yeah, I mean that's what he aims to do and believes he accomplished in his moral system. And there are Kantians who are like, if you understand what he's up to, you would agree it. Like the reason you don't agree with him is because you don't
understand it.
Right. Which is like everything. Like it's the same with calculus. Like, like the reason I don't think this works if I don't think this works is I don't understand it.
You don't understand it.
Right. He's engaging in I think a different project than these other folks.
And within the three, there's the human person, virtue. There's consequentialist, which is the outcome, and he sits in the middle of the human action.
Right. And so part of why we call it deontological ethics is because it's rule-based ethics, right? And so it's an idea that, like, if we're doing something moral, we're doing it because that thing is good to do, right? And what makes it good, he will argue, is that it follows a rule. It follows a norm. And this is an interesting argument. See if you can follow me with this, because he is hard. I mean, Kant is that philosopher that like philosophers like are like, I understand Kant. I'm a real philosopher, right? And there are like definitely philosophers out there who don't want to talk about Kant because they don't want to look stupid because he's so hard to wrap his head around.
Oh my
God! So he's a very difficult and nuanced thinker, and it has been. I am mostly humbled by Kant. Like, when I read Kant, I am not sure if he's the most brilliant philosopher in the tradition or if he's a madman. He's probably one or the other.
He's either the most brilliant or he's a madman.
Right. I think he's increasingly, like, there's things I've gone back to, and I come back and I'm like, whoa, I think he's right. So anyway, the argument goes something like this. He says, well, what makes an action moral? Mm-hmm. What makes an action moral is that my motivation to do it is pure.
Yeah, not from self-interest or passion, but out of respect for moral law.
Right.
Human reason generating categorical imperatives or rules of action that prescind from self-interest.
Right. And so he's like, look, if I'm trying to do this because I want to produce a good for you, that's not what makes it moral.
Right.
What makes it moral is that, like, I might have a law that I'm supposed to do good for you, and I'm following that law that I'm supposed to do good for you. So there's a level at which he's really trying to drill down and says, what is the source of moral law? Part of what he's trying to do is to do that within reason alone, right? Mm-hmm. He has this commitment that we can use reason to get there.
This is the categorical imperative that he's talking about.
And he'll ultimately arrive at the categorical imperative, right? Which is its own kind of confusing thing because there's three formulations.
Oh my God.
that sound very different from each other. But its first formulation is usually something along the lines of, if I'm going to do something, it should be something I'm doing because I'm following a moral law that would be equally applicable in any case like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that universality of the law itself is what establishes its truth, right? And so if I think through things and I realize that there's some reason to do this, some law, some principle I'm following that would be universally applicable in any case, then that is what gives it its moral law. That is the highest standard of the moral law.
That it's universally accepted.
Right. And so it gets a little easier to understand if you think about some of his examples. He says, for example, if I am lending or I'm borrowing money from you, right, with no intent to pay it back.
That's not borrowing.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly the point.
You used the wrong word.
Right. Right. Exactly. And that's why.
Change that word to taking money from me.
Exactly.
And then we're good.
Right. And so the fact that I would borrow money from you without
you have to pay it back.
I have violated the basic principle that allows
Our
the
contract,
act of borrowing to take place.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And so that's what establishes its normativity, its moral weight, is its universality.
Yeah, universally, if someone says, but sometimes people say they're going to borrow something and they never intend to pay it back. Like things like, can you lend me, can you lend me a piece of paper?
Right.
I'm lending them that piece of paper. I'm never getting it back.
Right.
It's a piece of paper. I rip it out of here.
Right.
I give it to them. They write on it. It's over.
Yeah, and that's probably just a failure of our language to
use borrow
correspond to what we're actually saying.
Yeah.
I think in those cases there's a mutual understanding between us.
Yeah.
That you're not really lending.
I'll sometimes bring it up.
We're just using the term lend to be polite.
Yeah.
Right? No, I have that problem too because I tend to be a literalist in the way I speak and think, and so.
I'm a literalist. I just found out.
Like I end up being pedantic, right?
I am too.
Right.
So,
and I just try to remind myself that that's not the case.
But with money, and if it's over the amount you would use to get a soda,
right?
Borrow means a certain thing.
Mm-hmm.
It means that at some point I'm going to get this back.
Right. So yeah, that's the basics of it, and that if you think through things, you can establish a set of rules, right? Now, I mean, he ultimately is like, hey. These rules look like the basic moral teachings of the Christian tradition. That's a warrant that they're true, right? For him, that's like that. There's an alignment between reason and faith.
So some kind of pattern,
right?
Historic pattern
is an even greater, like sort of like yeah.
He was Christian?
Yeah, he was a pietist Christian. So I think not
pietist. What does pietist means? He was a devout.
Yeah, I mean it's a type of
pious or pietist?
Well, it's a tradition of. Christianity in Germany. It's part of what lays the groundwork for like evangelical Christianity.
Okay.
So it is a form of Christianity that focuses very much on the inner journey of the person of faith around a life of faith, right? So he was very concerned with that, but he also wanted to figure out ways, as he saw happening in the sciences, to know and understand the world through reason and observation. And here, really reason. That didn't have to rely on a particular tradition's ideas about the nature of revelation and whatnot.